So those formed elements that we spoke about before are the erythrocytes, and then the leukocytes and platelets, which remember are in the buffy coat. The main function of the erythrocytes is that it has a very important protein in it, which is called hemoglobin. And the hemoglobin basically acts as a bus to transport both oxygen and carbon dioxide. But one of the things that we know about erythrocytes is that they have no nucleus. And so that means that they can't divide. Therefore, they only live for about 120 days. The leukocytes are responsible for initiating the immune response. So they're kind of like the first ones on the scene when there's an invasion of a foreign invader. So they defend us against harmful substances. And they vary in their lifespan from 12 hours like a neutrophil to many years in the case of a lymphocyte. Finally, the platelets are cell fragments important in blood clotting, and they only last for a few days. The erythrocytes are commonly called red blood cells, as you know by now. They're not true cells because they lack a nucleus, and their shape is really interesting. It's biconcave, and that's super important in this case because that design is going to increase the surface area for its main job, which is to transport the respiratory gases. So that's primarily oxygen, but it's also carbon dioxide. And the hemoglobin is that very important protein with iron in the center of it that chemically attaches to both oxygen and carbon dioxide. That's why I said it's kind of like a bus. So, for example, in the lungs, the oxygen is going to attach to the hemoglobin in the red blood cell. That'll be transported to the tissues. Then the oxygen kind of gets off the bus and then goes into the tissues. After the 120-day period, old erythrocytes are destroyed in the liver as well as the spleen. The other unique thing about erythrocytes is that they have what are called surface antigens on them. And these are specialized proteins which are called agglutinogens. And the way I always like to remember these is they kind of are like a zip code in that they identify that red blood cell as being either type A or type B. So type A and B are their own antigens. So there's no such thing as a type O antigen. Type O blood just means that there is no antigen or agglutinogen at all. It's kind of like a naked red blood cell. So these surface antigens are actually on the membrane for the red blood cell. So in this case, a type B erythrocyte has only the B antigen. It would have no A antigen. Type O blood would have neither the A antigen or the B antigen and is basically naked. It has no A or B protein. Now, the antibody is something different that's actually in the plasma. So that can be the confusing thing to student is to differentiate, to be sure that you differentiate the antigen from the antibody. The antigen is only present on the membrane of the red blood cell, but the antibody is only in the plasma. And it's a protein that is formed from the immune system. So the antibody that is present is against every other antigen. So type B blood would have the anti-A antibody. Type O blood would have both the anti-A and the anti-B antibodies in its plasma. And this is super, super important. And this is why they do blood typing when somebody comes into the hospital and before they do a blood donation or a blood transfusion, they need to clearly identify what blood type somebody has. So if there's mismatched blood that is transfused, the recipient's antibodies are going to cause agglutination, which is clumping of those donated erythrocytes. This is very, very serious and could lead to death. And it could lead to rupture or what's called hemolysis of those clumped erythrocytes. So on our next slide here, we can see examples of these different red blood cells. So just remember that whatever type it is due to a protein on its membrane. So if you have blood type A, you have the surface antigen for A. So it's basically a protein that identifies the cell as being type A. On all cells that we have in our body, as well as bacteria and other things that could activate the immune system, they all have antigens. And again, an antigen is called an agglutinogen. So type B blood is going to have the B antigen. Type AB means that it has both antigens. So there's no such thing as an AB antigen. It just means there's the presence of the A antigen as well as the B antigen. Type O blood has neither surface antigen. It's basically a naked membrane. So it has no identifiable antigen A or B. As for the plasma, we need to remember that the plasma automatically has proteins against all foreign invaders. That's the best way to remember it. And usually antibodies are Y-shaped proteins, and they're going to be anti the other type of blood. So if you have type A blood, your plasma has antibodies against what you do not have, which in this case would be type B. So type A blood has the anti-B antibodies. Type B blood, since it has the B antigen, it's going to have anti-A antibodies. Type AB blood is going to have both the A antigen and the B antigen. So since it has both antigens, it's not going to have any antibodies. The type O blood, since it has no antigens, it's going to have antibodies against everything else. So it's for this reason that we refer to type AB blood as the universal recipient. When we consider a recipient, we have to think about the antibodies that are present. So if this person is receiving blood, it's their antibodies in their plasma which are going to attack the foreign invaders. In this case, they don't have any antibodies that are going to attack foreign invaders. So they could either receive type A or type B blood. In the case of type O, they have antibodies for both. So they are the universal donor. And the reason they're the universal donor is when we consider donation, we're only talking about red blood cells, not antibodies, because it's not the plasma that's being donated. It's only the red blood cells. So there's no antigens that are present here. So we could give type O blood to any of these, and their antibodies wouldn't have anything to attack on that red blood cell for type O.